There are songs that the birds don't sing to people, secrets that keep right through to the end, heroes that hide until forever, and I'm singing this song for one of them. He's the man that you passed on the road there, the one with his life on the loose, going either somewhere or nowhere.
It's me again, Willie Jones, your host of Your Friends and Neighbors, and we have a really interesting show today. A little bit, maybe a little classier than usual. We're going to be talking about opera, something I don't know an awful lot about, but I think by the end of our show, you and I are going to know quite a bit more about opera, and two, especially one opera in particular. My guest today is the founder of Opera Oggi, O-G-G-I, and his name is Thomas Toscano. And good afternoon, Mr. Toscano.
Good afternoon, Willie.
How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Good, good. We're glad to hear that you're thinking about moving yourself up here to Vermont.
Absolutely.
So that's a nice thing to know. Well, Mr. Toscano, now I received these papers with all of the accolades and everything that Mr. Toscano has been involved in. And we would be here all day talking about that. But what if we were to pare it down to just the essentials? I mean, what is the most important thing we should know about Thomas Toscano?
Wow. A test.
It's not easy because there's a lot there.
No. Well, I guess that I've been a musician since I was 5.
Oh, okay.
I started on accordion. Very popular in those days.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I was invited to play. They found out I played an instrument. I lived in the Bronx until I was 13. We moved upstate to Mahopac, near Danbury, near Brewster, that general area. And I was asked to bring my accordion in, and I walked in and sat down. What are you going to play? Are you going to play a polka?
Yeah.
No, I don't play polkas. What are you going to play? I'm going to play Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto in E minor.
On an accordion.
What? And I played, and they were astounded. So I went literally from teacher to teacher, and I believe I was a sophomore at this time. Basically, I was one of the school nerds. And so I went to the top teacher, the orchestra conductor, and played another piece for him. And he said, okay, you got to play for the school. So I went in, and they had me play for an assembly. This is going to date me, but it was exactly the day that Martin Luther King was killed. And sat down, played the assembly, the orchestra sitting behind me. I played the first movement of Mendelssohn's Concerto. The student body went nuts, and I never got beat up again.
Now, did you know that music was always going to be a part of your life?
I did and I didn't. I quit when I was 12 for about a year, and my mother one day came into my room and said, I don't know why you don't just get rid of that. You're never going to play again. I said, that's not true. And then all of these different things occurred. Because of playing in the high school, the teachers deeply recognized my talent. So I became their assistant conductor at 14. And that's how I started to conduct.
Yeah.
They said, can you conduct? Sure, show me. I showed them. Go take rehearsal. I got other things to do. And that's how I started to conduct. And from basically then on, it was clear. Once I started to conduct at 14, it was pretty clear that that's what I was going to do.
And when did opera become a big part of your life?
Again, in high school, very interesting. What instrument am I going to go to school on? Because I didn't know of anybody giving degrees in accordion, and I didn't want to have a degree in accordion. And I was playing baritone horn, bass fiddle, timpani, but I wasn't good enough to get a major in one of those.
Right.
I had only been playing for a year or two by the time I went to audition for college. And I asked my choral teacher, can I audition as a singer? Oh, no, you can't do that. So I ended up auditioning for a number of different schools, Syracuse, Potsdam, Fredonia. Nobody accepted me. They couldn't believe how many instruments I played. They couldn't believe how well I played accordion, but nobody accepted me. They didn't know what to do with me. I got accepted to the University of Denver, went to the University of Denver, was there for 2 months, I was in the Glee Club because everybody had to be in a number of ensembles. And the head of the Glee Club was the head of the voice department, Dr. Ron Worstel. And he pulled me aside one day and he said, you know, you should be a singer. What? I'm very serious. You have a very good tenor voice. You're kidding me. No. So I asked a friend of mine, who's still a friend of mine, is he serious? He said, yes, he's very serious. And I became a singer and finished my degree as a singer, but I was also conducting. I was also a choral conductor. And I got a BME in choral conducting and voice, and then went to New England Conservatory as a tenor and studied voice and opera direction for 2.5 years. But I didn't do that much opera. Mm-hmm. And then I went to Tanglewood for 2 years because I was living in Boston.
Okay.
And went to South America to conduct, you know, the Venezuelan, the National Youth Orchestra of Venezuela, which now is very famous. And also went with my ensemble that I created, the Lyric Arts Ensemble. We went to Caracas, and for the first International Arts Festival, we were part of the formation of that arts festival. Mm. And the big name of that festival was Rostropovich, the great Russian cellist, okay, and his wife were called, and he conducted the orchestra, she sang. I could tell you a million stories about that. But we went and did 6 workshops and 5 concerts with my ensemble of 14 people from Boston. And after 2 years at Tanglewood, I met a soprano. We fell in love. She lived in New Haven. Nothing was really holding me in Boston. I was conducting in the New England area. And I moved to New Haven. And I heard about this conductor at Yale. And I had already finished my master's. Wasn't thinking about going back to school. But I went into Woolsey Hall, sat down, and watched him conduct. This very tall man, looked like sort of Frankenstein, looked like Lurch. He had that kind of head structure. Yeah. A real German conductor. And I said, well, I have to study with this man. He's really a genius. So I started studying with him privately, and then in '84 he invited me to take part in get another master's, which I did. And after those 2 years, you know, my life adventure continued again. And the next thing you know, I sort of heard this inner voice to go to Brazil. And I knew one Brazilian. I knew a lot of Venezuelans, a lot of Colombians, a lot of people from San Salvador, all over Latin and South America, but only one Brazilian. And he invited me to go with him to Brazil for 10 days. And I went. I actually passed my birthday there and had a very interesting time and realized that there was possibilities there. And I really had this burning desire to be a part of music history. And I didn't, you know, I was already assistant conductor of the Norwalk Symphony in Connecticut. I was finishing up my degree at Yale, my second master's, and I knew how the system worked here. And I just felt I really want to do something significant. And here I'll just be another assistant conductor. So I took the voice I heard the voice. I said, okay, sold everything I had and moved to Brazil in July after finishing my master's, and stayed there for 6 years.
Wow.
And then came back here and still was not really doing opera. I did do a Philip Glass opera in South America, but my main thrust was orchestral conducting. I conducted all over Brazil, formed 2 orchestras there. And finally in '93, I came back to the United States and founded the Greenwich Village Philharmonic, again orchestral. But I also started to compose, I was in my 40s and I started to compose. I had never wanted to compose before. And I started to compose for voice because I had been a singer as well as playing many other instruments, but I had done a lot of singing. And wrote my first piece for string quartet and voice. And then the second piece that I wrote was some Italian songs based on the poetry of my great-grandfather, who had a fascinating life. Started off to be a priest, ended up being a tailor in New York City and a poet. And one thing led to another, and I wrote these songs. I found a singer to sing them. They were very beautiful and got an inspiration to start the Greenwich Village Philharmonic. I somehow put it together by these miracles happening here and there, raised money, never was able to raise that much money ever again. And we did these performances and recorded those songs, which I actually played over WBTN actually today. Two of the songs are going to be played at 4 o'clock on WBTN.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of course, now this show won't be on probably for, a few more days,
True,
a few
true.
days away. But so as we're taping today, it's on WBTN.
Those songs will be played
Oh, that's
again.
great.
Some of them.
Yeah.
And, the orchestra ran for a couple of years. We were able to keep it going for a couple of years. But then 9/11 happened, because we started in 97. 9/11 happened, and that was the end of that. We couldn't succumb that great tragedy.
No.
And it was in Greenwich Village, so it was in the general area where,
Right.
where all the problems happened, especially the health problems.
Right.
And then then because of 9/11, I got inspired to write this work called Messaggio e Domanda, which connects the eruptions of Etna with 9/11, because for me they were connected.
Okay.
I had sort of a premonition with the eruptions of Etna 3 months before 9/11 happened. Heard in a dream, not in a dream, but I was I kept waking up, and I didn't understand why I was waking up during that summer, because my entire family, all my grandparents are from Sicily, and 3/4 of my grandparents were from Catania, Regione di Catania, which is where Mount Etna is, the volcano. And ever since I was a child, my grandfather Gaetano Toscano would tell me stories, legends about the volcano, because his town was there. And in fact, in the late 20s, it was destroyed by the volcano. So it was natural for me to have my attention drawn to these eruptions, and I started to pay attention to them. It was 97. It was 2001. So the internet was happening, and you could watch on those cameras, remote cameras. I would watch the pictures, and I started to wake up. I couldn't sleep, and why am I waking up? And one night when I woke up, I went upstairs. I had a loft right on the East River in Newtown Creek, and I heard this answer come, because the volcano has a message, like in Greek times. The oracle would hear something from the volcano and tell the people.
Right.
And I said, oh, yeah, okay, what is it? There's too much violence, and it has to stop. So I started to write a piece called Message One, Messaggio Uno. It was very dark and low instruments and an alto voice. Nothing came of it. The summer passed. One beautiful day, beautiful September day, we get a horrible heat wave, and then that morning it broke. It was crisp. It was in the high 60s. Enormously gorgeous sky. Went out with my beautiful white German Shepherd, played ball, came back, was fixing breakfast for him and the cat, sat down, and I did something I never do. I turned on the TV in the morning, and as I turned on the TV, I saw smoke on the Twin Towers. And I went, what? What's that? And all I had to do was look above the television, because my loft had 10 windows and 5 skylights. So I had a 259-degree view of the entire Manhattan skyline and the bridges. Wow. And there it was on fire. And from that, all kinds of things happened. I took pictures, I called friends, people started to come to watch what was happening. The second plane hit, thank God I didn't see it. And then I watched the buildings fall. And when the buildings fell, what was left was the smoke.
Billowing, yeah.
Yeah, but it was also, there was a wind to the southeast, and the smoke, it looked like the volcano.
Okay.
And I heard, the volcano has come to Manhattan. And I was devastated. I mean, I couldn't,
Wow,
I didn't
why
know,
not?
am I nut? Am
Of
I going
course,
crazy? What's
yeah.
going on here? And about 6 months later, I started to write a piece about it, and found an ensemble through a dear friend of mine, Giovanni Solima, who was a great cellist, professor of cello at Santa Cecilia in Rome, and a wonderful composer. And he put me in touch with this wonderful ensemble in Sicily. They did my work. I went to Sicily, had never gone, because I promised myself I would never go as a tourist, only as an artist. So I went to Sicily, where all my grandparents were from, and had a life-changing experience doing that piece. And they loved it. They went crazy over it. And it literally connected the two events.
Right.
And from then on, I started to become much more involved in voice. I came back here and went there again. I started to do some opera coaching with Sonia Turchetta, a wonderful mezzo-soprano at the Conservatory of Milano, the Giuseppe Verdi, where Puccini studied, where many, many great people studied. And I just felt myself becoming more drawn to opera. So I followed it and started to work with this other opera company, Pacific Opera, Pacific Encore Performances. And after a couple of years, it became clear that they only did scenes. They would do Broadway. They'd mix Broadway with opera. It was very good. But they didn't want to do full opera. And the singers kept complaining, we have to have full opera. We have to have full opera. I said to them, why don't you let me do it? No, nobody will come. I said, who cares if nobody comes? Well, no, but... And so one day, I sort of decided, let's do it. There was a Chloe Owen, who was a 88-year-old voice teacher, retired, wonderful, wonderful person. I asked her to join me. I asked my friend Bill Lewis, my Furch coach that I mentioned before.
Right.
And we started at Opera Oggi, New York. And that was 2007, and here we are.
And now you're going to be bringing it to Bennington, Vermont.
Absolutely.
And you're bringing 2 one-act. I have a couple of questions I would like to ask you, but I don't want us to lose time to talk about the shows that are coming up on November 8th and 9th at Oldcastle Theater. 2 one-acts. One, which is The Telephone,
yes,
by Menotti.
Menotti.
And I understand from a fiery redhead named Ida Fiala that Menotti was one of those people that was sort of overlooked, that people did not give him the credit that they probably should have.
The opera world is very full of itself. And since although I was a singer, I was an instrumentalist from 5 years old, so I never really became one of those opera people. And I'm not telling you that there's actually something wrong with it, but I had a distance to the opera world, that detachment that helped me become more honest about what is and what isn't. And I say that the opera world is full of itself because they looked upon Menotti as an upstart. They looked upon him as somebody who just wasn't really at the level that they required. However, they were totally wrong, because they took Menotti's operas and they produced them on Broadway, and they were smash hits. And the one that we're going to do is The Telephone. It's a 20-minute opera. It's about a young girl in the 1940s who gets her first telephone, and her boyfriend comes to the house, and he's decided he wants to marry her. And he's going to ask her at that moment. And every time he tries to ask her, the phone rings, or she says, I have to call my friend, or I have to, time? He mentions the time. She says, do you want to know what time it is? She calls the time to find out what time it is. Through the whole opera, he can't get a word in edgewise because she's on the phone. And then he leaves, and she's sad that he's left, and he calls her on a phone from the train station. And it's a beautiful, happy ending. It's absolutely charming.
It's a little lighter.
It's very light and very funny.
Than your show. And the title of your show?
My opera is a part of an opera mini-series. Right. It's Made in America is the opera mini-series. It's episode 1, and this particular episode is entitled The Interview.
And I know that we are going to be playing some clips from the opera,
yes,
within this show. So we probably should talk about the interview and how these clips are going to be used in the show. How are we going to be doing this? You know me, I'm not the technological person that a lot of people are. So I know these are going to be inserted at some point.
Yes, we're going to have 3 clips. The first clip is when it's close to the beginning of the opera. Al-Zubra, who is the Muslim, it's about a Muslim woman and a Jewish woman. Both of them are mothers. Both of them have lost 2 children, 3 and 5 and 7 and 9. The Muslim woman, Al-Zubra, is actually an American. She was born in Maryland, met a doctor at Johns Hopkins. They fell in love. He was from Yemen. They married. She became a Muslim. She was Presbyterian, but now she became a Muslim. Went to Yemen and lived with him, had 2 beautiful children, 3 and 5, and they're killed. And they're killed by a drone attack. That's a mistake. Wrong house, wrong man. and they were crushed by a building that falls. Horrible. She goes to East Jerusalem with her husband because he's hired after the tragedy to be the pediatrician for that area. And she meets this woman who's Jewish, who's an Israeli citizen who's lived there all her life, and she lost 2 children at a mishap at one of the crossing stations. And so the first clip is her telling the story of what happened to her children. And at the beginning of the clip, she speaks to the journalist, the public affairs army officer who's come to interview them to find out what they're doing. And she says to him, speaking, please, please, I can only tell you once, because she's very afraid that she's going to break down. And so that's what the first clip is.
Please, please. Only once? I can only tell you once. I wasn't there. We had just arrived at my mother-in-law's house. Up yonder the daylight breeze, so much blue and white. I was at the door. My children across the street in the car. My husband was not with us. A sound, I thought I heard a sound, a whirring cricket, a metallic. Something, something, I heard something. And then the building, and then the building across the street. A missile hit the building, blew it out, and buried
And the both of these operas are in English.
Yes.
So
they
if
are.
anyone is thinking, oh, I don't know, I'm not going to understand if it's in German or Italian, but they're both in English. So if you're a little hesitant about opera, this might be a good way to get yourself started on opera if you've always thought, I don't know. So
They're not only in English, but I guarantee you that if you come to see the opera, you will understand every single word
oh, okay.
while
So
they're
not
singing,
all- oh, okay.
which is not necessarily the case normally. But the way that I work and my values and whatnot, I've trained them how to sing in such a way that it's like watching a play
Okay.
or a musical. You actually understand everything that they're saying. And of course, that's what's required, because then the audience becomes a part of what's really happening, instead of looking down at subtitles or looking at what did she say? What is this about? They're involved, and we've had wonderful, wonderful success. And of course, I have very, very talented young singers.
Right. And then the second clip takes us to
second-
what part of the show?
Now,
of
the
the
second
opera?
clip is where Alzubra, later on in the opera, does break down. And as she's going through a very difficult emotional moment, Anat, who's the Jewish woman, stands, gets behind her, and begins to sing one of the prayers of the dead for her children. And it's a very powerful moment, because a Jewish woman, a woman of the Jewish faith, is singing prayers of the dead for the children of a Muslim woman. And it's very beautiful and very, very, it's a prayer that she sings.
Very
She
moving, yeah.
It's very, very moving. And the third clip is the army officer who listens to all of this, and he constantly says through the opera, he doesn't say a lot, he asks interview questions and listens, but every time they tell him a story, he says, I'm sorry, I can't take sides, I'm sorry, I can't comment. And at one point, Anat, the Jewish woman, says, why? Because you're an officer? Because you're a journalist? And he says, both. She says, oh, what an easy excuse. Isn't that convenient? That you don't have to see truth. And this third clip is where he stands and says to them, please understand, I recognize your suffering. I'm very sorry for you, but I'm trained and indoctrinated not to have an opinion. And then he looks at one of them and starts to sing this aria, You have my mother's eyes, and begins to speak about how his mother would be on their side, how his mother would be grieving the way they're grieving. And he says, what would my mother say to me faced with faced with what's going on here, with what happened to your children? What would she say to me? So he becomes transformed. And that's what the third clip is.
Now, you also said that you like to do a Q&A.
Yes.
Q&A with your audience.
Yes, it's a 40. We have the 20-minute opera of Menotti, and we have a 40-minute opera of mine. There, of course, will be a little intermission in between. And after that, which is about 60, 70 minutes, we have every time we perform, we do this. We have a question and answer period.
Right.
The cast stand is there, the pianist is there, I'm there. And we invite the audience to ask us anything they want to ask about the opera, about the company. And we've had some very, very powerful conversations about the whole thing. People say what they want to say.
Right. Huh. I mentioned Ida Faella a minute ago, and another thing that she mentioned to me, and she said she was thinking about this herself. Ida was going to be with us today, but she's been having car problems, and she's stuck someplace else, so she couldn't join us. But when I was talking to her, she said something she'd been thinking about was the difference between putting on a play and putting on an opera. What is the difference? I mean, I'm sure there is a big difference between a straight or comedy play and then something doing an opera. What would you say is the biggest, the most similar and the most different?
Well, certainly, let's sort of compare opera with a dramatic play.
Right.
I think that's easiest for people. Musical theater, there are differences, there are not differences. Those are more technical. But the reality of, are you speaking, are you singing? When you're speaking a straight play, it's life. It's life as we know it. You're talking to someone, they're talking back to you, whatever the action is, it happens in life. You don't need anything else. In opera, you have to have some sort of a musical accompaniment, or most of the time, unless you're getting into super avant-garde opera. And also, but you're still on the stage, you're still acting, but now not only are you acting, but you're also singing. Now, in my operas, I also include speech.
Right.
So it allows sort of a break and a difference than traditional opera. But the act of singing, someone said, there's that famous phrase, singing is praying twice.
I've never heard that.
Oh yeah, that's what a lot of people in church, they say singing is praying twice. When you're singing church music, not only are you reciting the prayer,
right,
but you're singing,
right,
and you're singing in their minds. You're singing with God's gift, which is your voice. Yeah. Well, there's something to that. There's another dimension. There's the dimension of the musical accompaniment, which is descriptive, which just like in a film. You get, the villain is walking, the heroine is here, the music changes,
right,
something's going to happen.
Right.
Same thing happens in opera. So you have these other dimensions that begin to open up.
Right.
And of course the requirements, the challenges for the singer, it's a very different mechanism, even though it's the same throat. It's a very different mechanism to sing, and takes a great deal of time. Years to really get to the levels where opera lives. And the reason that opera became so powerful in the 19th century, Wagner, Verdi, Puccini, these people Verdi changed the history of Italy. He was part of the reason that Italy became a nation, that they revolted against all the different rulers and came together because of Verdi's efforts and Verdi's operas. He was constantly being plagued by the censors because of what he was writing. So it was an enormously powerful art form. And the reason was, from a philosophical standpoint, Wagner wrote a great deal about this, is that they took theater, which is an art form, drama, literature, which is an art form, music, which is an art form, and painting, because of the scenic design and all of that we haven't even, I don't use that, so that's not even an element in what I do. And put all of them together into what they called the supreme art form. So I hope that I've answered your question.
Yeah, no, I'm sure when Ida listens to this, she will thank you for that. Here on Cat TV, Channel 16, there's a show called Classic Arts Showcase. And I find myself watching that quite often because they do scenes from operas.
Wonderful.
And they have some of these classic things from years ago with Mary Martin and Ethel Merman and a lot of things to do with art pieces, and it's a wonderful show to watch here on and that has sort of helped me get to know opera a little bit. I feel with opera the way I feel when I'm watching a parade and the drums go by and you've got that feeling in your gut hearing those drums. When I hear opera, I mean, to me, it just, I don't know, my whole insides just sort of, you just want to jump out of your seat, and you just have that feeling, because it is so dramatic. But now, you've told me that you're a fisherman.
Yes,
Does
I
your
am.
fishing come into helping you with your opera work at all?
Well, certainly.
For,
Absolutely, no question about it.
Yeah.
First of all, I worked a lot on my new op, the second episode
that you're working on, right?
Right, that I'm working on now, and I'm going to complete it hopefully here in Bennington this winter.
Yeah.
I'm going to complete it and start the third episode.
Oh, wow.
But I spent a lot of the summer up here, some of it up in Canada, then coming back here, and did a lot of fishing. I fish as much as I can. And the truth of it is that just like Brahms, just like Beethoven, Brahms would spend the summers in Germany. He would leave Vienna and he would take many Germans do this. This is still part of their history. Walking tours. They take their walking sticks and their rucksacks and they go in the mountains and they spend the summer.
Sure.
They stop at a place here, stop at a place there. And Brahms would do that. And in Beethoven he's constantly writing in his notes and his books about walking by the streams and being in the forest. And it's certainly something that is true for me too. It's not just about fishing. And frankly, I've said it a million times. I love to go fishing. Of course I love to catch fish. But I also don't care if I catch fish.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
okay if I don't catch fish. Because being outside, being there, I connect with it so deeply, and I have since I was a child, because my father started taking me hunting when I was 5 or 6, and I'm in love with it. It's who I am. It's one reason why I'm moving here. It's time for me to be outside, gone from the city, and be where I belong, which is here, in nature, in the mountains, in the streams.
Well, we'll be glad to have you here, I'm sure.
Man,
and I hope that when part 2 is done, Oldcastle will get a chance to hear that one at some point too. That would be great. The other thing I wanted to ask you about these 2 shows that you're doing on November 8th and 9th at Oldcastle Theater. How did you choose the telephone to go along with this show of your show, The Interview? I mean, because there's such a difference between the two. Is that why? So people get a whole different view of opera, or?
You know, a lot of it, there are many reasons why. One of it is that it was in our repertoire, so it was a very easy choice.
Oh, okay.
From a musical standpoint, it makes a great deal of sense because it's a sort of an aperitif. It's 20 minutes. That's not very long. It's a comedy. It's very beautiful. It's some very beautiful human moments. Sort of heartbreaking, very nostalgic. It's set in the 40s, which is sort of a favorite time of mine. And they do a really wonderful job. It's only 2 singers. And it's about romance. My opera is about the death of children, about women empowering themselves, about war, about excessive war,
but
all these
hope.
very heavy things. Yes, and that's what's wonderful about the opera at the end, is that the 2 women, he asks them a question. He says, but ladies, you talk about a plan, you have this group that you're forming. Where are these ideas coming from? And they look at them and they say, we're being led. It was by whom? Our children. That they see them, then they sing. We see them, we see our children every day at play and here and there. They've transformed themselves, and they've brought women together who think the same way, and they actually say it very clearly. We don't condemn anybody, but it's time to stop.
Right.
It's very uplifting. And the 2 operas, because of the numbers, there's 3 people in my opera, 2 people in Menotti's opera. They fit very well together. And of course, I'm biased because I happen to adore Menotti. Okay. I love what he does. I love how audiences react to it. We had a lovely experience in New York State last summer in Franklin. They have a stage theater there, that's a repertory theater that's been 17 years in existence. And it was the first opera ever done in their legit stage. And the audience went nuts. They ate it up. I, of course, attributed to the fact that they could actually watch an opera and understand the words.
Right.
But it's such a lovely story and so entertaining, and so, reminds everybody of when they were in love and when they were asked to be married. It's very, very, very wonderful.
You mentioned repertoire. How many operas do you have in your repertoire? And do you have full operas too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We do very often. Basically, every year we do Puccini's Suor Angelica because they're mostly women. There are men, of course, in opera. There are young men, of course, in opera, but there are mostly women in our in the pool of singers.
Right.
So we take an opera that uses all women. It's about 14, can be 14, 15, 18 women, and it's set place in a convent.
Right. You were saying, yeah.
So we do that. We've done The Barber of Seville, which is very famous. Where you have that famous aria, Figaro, Figaro, Figaro. And just extremely entertaining. Lots of fun to do. We've done Hansel and Gretel. We're doing it again this winter,
great.
actually. We're going to be doing it in Brooklyn, yes, this winter. It's too many people to bring up here. And plus, who knows what the weather might be.
That by Humperdinck?
Yes,
Ah,
Engelbert
hey,
Humperdinck.
Hey, all right.
Right? We all remember the famous singer who stole his name.
But not the same, yeah.
No, not the same person at all.
He stole the name.
He stole the name. And we have also done The Magic Flute, quite a popular opera. So
Have you gone into schools?
Yes,
Yes?
we've gone into schools. As a matter of fact, I received an email today that we're looking into taking Hansel and Gretel into schools.
Oh,
We're
great.
bringing school children into the church where we're in residence at the moment, which is the Co-Cathedral of Brooklyn. So we're going to be bringing in school children, Catholic school children, public school children in to see it. But I'm thrilled to hear that we're actually going to go into another school, into a physical building, perhaps in the Bronx.
Now, the elementary grades or high school, middle school? What do you know?
I'm not sure.
Maybe a mixture?
Probably a mixture, but frankly, it doesn't really matter. Our audiences have been filled of people of all ages.
You get the Q&A session. What are some of the most, some questions that you get to ask the most about opera? Are there certain questions that come up every single time?
About this opera?
Any.
Yeah, they basically ask. We did once before we had a Q&A, but it was for a different reason.
Oh,
In
okay.
this case, we do the Q&A because it's such a hot topic. It's such a political reality, and we wanted to give people voice afterwards. But one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, where did the story come from?
Yeah, because I forgot. I was going to ask you that. Is this based on any true events?
Yes, it's based on what's really happening.
Okay.
But specific events, no.
No, just
we don't. I don't have a report about a building falling on, but I know that it's happened.
Right.
I don't have a report about children being shot near border crossings, but I know that it's happened.
Right.
I did a great deal of research, so everything that is said in the opera comes from fact. It's not made up. But the actual story and what they do is what was told to me as I was composing it.
When you were a kid, did you think, you said that, music became a part of your life very early. Did you ever think you wanted to maybe be a cop or a fireman, or any of that stuff ever come into mind? Or was it just, okay, no, music, that's my life?
I started when I was 5, and when I was 7, I won a national competition. And that was sort of a big deal.
Yeah.
And I felt very connected to music. So I sort of had the sense of something, but I also wanted to be a mad scientist.
A mad scientist.
Yeah. I think I got the hair of a mad scientist. That's certainly true. And I wanted to be, I've thought a lot. I still think a lot about going into space. Because at that time there was the whole moon program. They were trying to go to the moon.
Right.
And then they did. When I was 16, they actually made it to the moon. So I remember that very deeply. And very interestingly, my great-grandfather, I said that I wrote about on my great-grandfather's poetry. He wrote about 75 poems. In 2 or 3 of his poems, he talks about one day man will go to the moon, because they were written in 1900. They hadn't gone to the moon. And my grandfather almost saw them go to the moon. He saw that they were just about to get there. My great-grandfather,
Yeah.
just about to get there, and he died 6 months before they made it.
Was any of this poetry published? Or
No,
is it just
self-published.
self-published?
He published his own. He published books. He made them handmade books,
Oh.
stapled them together, and handed them out to people.
Huh. What are some of the best memories you have of the older people in your family?
Oh well,
I mean, I know we don't have a lot of time, but
No,
just
no, sure.
like a couple memories you
No,
might have
but-
that probably will show up in one of your music at some point.
Yes, I am who I am because of my grandparents.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My mother's parents and my father's parents, as I said, everybody was from Sicily. They all spoke Sicilian. My mother's parents really hardly spoke English. So there was a lot of Sicilian spoke at home. Everybody around us spoke Sicilian. So, the great memories, easy. Eating.
Eating, okay.
Sitting at the table, then after eating, playing cards, preparing the food, cleaning up after the food, us playing outside, watching. Sometimes I remember sitting with my grandmother watching Lawrence Welk
Oh,
for years, for years. Don't ask me why. My brother, who's unfortunately died in 2003, but for years, my brother would go out clubbing on New Year's Eve. I would stay with my grandmother, and I would watch. She'd stay up for the ball, and
Guy Lombardo? Yeah, of course.
She'd watch Guy Lombardo. So we were very, 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 very close family.
Very close.
One set of our grandparents always lived with us, and the other set would always come and be with
Yeah.
us. And when we moved upstate to Mayapack, our house sort of became the house where everybody came because it was in the country. And my father put in a pool, dug a pool. He was in excavation, so we made our own pool. And I can't tell you the richness of my life.
Oh, that's great.
And if there's anything that I miss, it's that.
Uh-huh. I'm sure.
Because it was an extraordinary way to grow up. And having a great-grandfather who was an amateur poet, my grandfather found water. He was a diviner,
Oh,
self-taught.
cool.
you
Cool.
know, so
Wow.
it's really very colorful.
Yeah. Well, I know we've got to finish up here. I'm sorry to say. This has been very interesting. Remember, the main thing we want people to remember today from our show also is that on November 8th and 9th, Mr. Toscano and Opera Oggi will be at Old Castle Theater. And let's see, I would imagine they probably 7:30. That's what the times have been.
7:30 on the 8th
Okay.
and 3 o'clock on the 9th.
Oh, the 9th is going to be a matinee at 3 o'clock. Oh, okay. So where I'm looking forward to this, I plan to be there. I hope some of you will be there too. So I want to thank Mr. Toscano again. This has
Thank you,
been
sir.
very interesting. You've had quite a life, and there's a lot of stuff I know we could have talked about, but we didn't get to it. But so I just want to say to everybody, thank you so much for listening today. And whether you're watching us late night in your bed or having breakfast in the morning, whatever time you catch our show, hope you enjoy it. I enjoy doing it, and we'll see you again next time. So thank you. Talk to you later.
There are songs that the birds don't sing to people, secrets that keep right through to the end, heroes that hide until forever, and I'm singing this song for one of them. He's the man that you passed on the road there, one with his life on the loose, going either somewhere or nowhere.